Once upon a time, a young man named DeShawn found himself in the heart of the bustling city of Harborview, where each day was an uphill battle. DeShawn, only 23, worked tirelessly at a local factory. His job was strenuous, hours of heavy machine operation, cleaning floors, and enduring the ceaseless demands of his harsh supervisor. By the time he left work, his entire body ached, but he had no choice. He needed every penny to support his family. That evening, DeShawn was lucky enough to grab a seat on the crowded bus. He sank into it, feeling the day's exhaustion wash over him. Just as he closed his eyes, a tremble in his heart pulled his attention to an elderly woman stepping onto the bus. She seemed fragile, with unsteady steps and hands gripping the pole for balance as the bus jolted forward. Without a second thought, DeShawn rose from his seat and offered it to her. "Ma'am, please take my seat," he said kindly. The woman looked at him with astonishment, a grateful smile spreading across her face as she sat down. "Thank you, young man," she said with a nod, settling into the seat with visible relief. DeShawn stood for the rest of the ride, a small price for the comfort he'd given her. As the bus approached DeShawn's stop, he felt a gentle tug on his sleeve. The woman had slipped something into his pocket, a small piece of paper folded carefully. DeShawn was too surprised to react before he was swept off the bus by the departing crowd. Standing on the sidewalk, he reached into his pocket, unfolded the paper, and found an address: 22 Maple Drive, followed by the numbers 98543. The address wasn't familiar, but something about it seemed urgent and mysterious. That night, he barely slept. Questions swirled in his mind. Could this be a trap? Was this some sort of prank? Despite his doubts, DeShawn felt a strange pull toward the address. The following morning, he hoped to see the woman again on the bus, but she didn't appear. For days, he searched for her, his curiosity only intensifying each time she was absent. By Friday, his day off, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. He gathered his courage and set off to find the address. With each passing mile, his heart pounded harder. The bus ride was a blur as he pondered what he might find. At last, he arrived at Maple Drive. Before him stood an imposing estate, unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall iron gates marked the entrance, guarding a path lined with manicured hedges and sprawling gardens. As he neared, he noticed a keypad on the gate. With a deep breath, he entered the code from the note, 98543. The gate swung open, inviting him into the estate. Following the winding path, DeShawn reached the mansion's front door, which was slightly ajar. He pushed it open, stepping into a grand foyer. His gaze swept across gleaming chandeliers and polished marble floors. But what truly caught his eye was the elderly woman from the bus, seated on a plush sofa, a gentle smile illuminating her face. "Welcome, DeShawn," she said warmly, her voice kind yet unwavering. She introduced herself as Mrs. Edith Lennox, a retired philanthropist with no family left. Edith explained how her health had declined over the years, leaving her vulnerable. She needed a trustworthy person to help her, not just in her daily routines, but as a steady presence in her life. The offer came as a shock to DeShawn. She was inviting him to become her live-in caretaker, a job that would pay 6 times what he made at the factory. This wasn't merely employment, it was a lifeline. After a brief hesitation, he agreed. Edith's trust in him felt surreal, but he couldn't deny the opportunity. Over the coming weeks, DeShawn settled into his new role, easing into the rhythms of the mansion and Edith's life. Their bond grew quickly, and Edith became like a grandmother to him. She shared tales from her past, stories of lost love, hard-earned wisdom, and wild adventures that brightened even the gloomiest of days. But then, one night, DeShawn was jolted awake by a strange noise. He sat up, his pulse racing. Moving quietly, he walked down the hall toward Edith's room. Suddenly, he heard it again, a faint sound like someone tampering with a lock. Before he could process what was happening, a masked man burst into Edith's room, holding a gun to her frail figure. "Give me the money," the intruder hissed, his voice filled with desperation. Fear surged through DeShawn, but his instincts took over. He lunged at the intruder, tackling him to the ground. A fierce struggle ensued. The intruder drew a knife, slashing DeShawn across the stomach. Despite the searing pain, DeShawn fought on, overpowering the man and forcing him to flee empty-handed. When the police arrived, Edith was safe, and DeShawn was rushed to the hospital. Edith stayed by his side, her gratitude boundless. Over the next few weeks, they grew even closer, but as time passed, Edith's health began to fade. When Edith finally passed away, DeShawn was devastated. He had lost not just an employer, but a dear friend and the person who had become his family. In his grief, he tried to move forward, cherishing the memories they'd shared. A few weeks later, he received an unexpected visit from Edith's lawyers. They presented him with a final surprise from her. Edith had left him everything: her estate, her investments, and her wealth. DeShawn was now the owner of a mansion and a small fortune, all because of a single act of kindness on a crowded bus. DeShawn's life transformed in ways he never could have imagined, all because he chose to give up his seat for an elderly woman in need. From that moment on, he carried Edith's memory with him, forever grateful for the twist of fate that had brought her into his life. And in Harborview, people would often speak of the young man who had gained a family, a home, and a fortune, all because of his kindness.